Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome production designer Steve Arnold, who joins us to talk about their work on Widow's Bay. Steve will talk us through the creative decisions made to create the look of the island and the surrounding area. Please be warned that are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Steve. Hi Steve, thank you for joining me today.
Hello.
We're here to talk about Widow's Bay, which is currently streaming on Apple TV. Before we jump into the project itself, how have you found the reception to the show?
I'm very happy that it's being so well received and that some people are really digging in for the little Easter eggs and things that are hidden. And it was a great project to work on.
Yeah, I think I don't want to say amazed, but it's interesting to see the reaction of the show and how people are sort of going bananas for it and how much traction it's getting and people enjoying it. I guess sometimes you just, we were talking off air, like you just don't know how things are going to track when you're making the show, and because you're there from sort of day one until wrap, you can kind of see it all build up. You know, you're building it all up.
Thing that I noticed right away was that it's so different from anything else that's out there, pretty much, being rather unique, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess the mixture of both, like comedy, well, maybe horror with a comedy element. It's kind of, it depends on what episode you watch, I guess, because it's like you have your horror and both comedy sides of it. But going to your involvement, how did the project come about for you, and what made you want to take it on?
I was given the connection with from my agent to meet with Katie and Hero and some of the other people at Chum Films. And I had done another series set on a remote island. And I'm actually speaking to you now from a somewhat remote island in Puget Sound, just north of Seattle. So that was part of my interest. It's set on the East Coast, which I've always enjoyed being there and seeing the different culture that is there. But yeah, it was just quirky and fun and funny. And the first reading of it, I wasn't quite sure whether it was seriously trying to be one or the other, or if it was a mix, and it seems like it's been a fairly successful mix of both.
Yeah, and is there any hesitation on your part when it comes to going back to doing a show set on an island and having slightly similar themes?
Not at all. Not at all. It's something that my family has a long history of island living, although I was not born on an island. I visited this particular island growing up regularly, and my grandparents were on the island. My parents were both born on this island. So I kind of know. I was speaking with my cousins a few nights ago, and they live on this island also. And they were saying how well we captured the quirkiness of what it is to live on an island.
Yeah, I guess that's probably a good way of being able to show that in your work. But even that, like, there must be sort of little things when you're designing and thinking like, this would be perfect to be in this in this island. It's like stuff like the museum for the island. It feels very like perfect for the area.
Mm-hmm.
And the little sort of things are like, this is how people used to live back in those days, and now it's slightly, now it's different. But when you go about designing for the show, where do you begin with people's houses and the look and feel of the island? Because There's obviously so much history there, but how do you incorporate that sort of their history into your designing?
One of the first things that I did was, having done this island thing before, was look at what the locations people had found that might seem like island, architecture and things like that, because you're somewhat limited by, you can build a world, but you can't build the entire world. So you've got to start with some location work. And the first thing that I found that it was in the photos was the town hall building, the exterior, which is in a little town called Berlin. And it seemed to be the right scale. It seemed to be the right age. It was slightly decrepit. It's not used as a town hall anymore. Coincidentally, we found the space inside that we used for the sheriff's office was actually in that building. So we did some modifications in there and used the inside, part of the inside, for the sheriff's office. But one of the very first things that I did was I had, I think, 3 episode scripts that were complete, fairly complete. And then we had outlines, pretty solid outlines for most of the rest of the show. And in one of the scenes, I saw the bit about where someone is drawn around their hand, the kind of the classic kid's turkey drawing. And I knew I wanted to come up with a design for the island itself. And so I drew around my hand. And then I made it sort of craggy and more rugged and kind of, I don't think I was thinking originally of it being like a hand or a claw or something that is gripping, holding these people hostage. But that seems to have blended into that. And it worked quite well. And if you look at it carefully, you will see that it's sort of a hand.
Do you find as well when you have those sort of moments, because you're mentioning that you sort of necessarily done it by accident in a way, do you find when you're doing something like that, you can start peppering those sort of ideas more into your design as well, knowing that you can go for a theme of like the hand is kind of gripping this island over, maybe we can use more of that sort of spooky imagery in designs, like maybe in the hotel, for example?
Yes. We had a heck of a time finding the exterior of that hotel because we knew we weren't going to build it. And I think optimistically, the producers thought, oh, we'll find some exterior and then we'll find some interior and we can marry them together and make that believable. We could not find an exterior for months. And finally, the cinematographer, Christian, had been living near, in a rental, living near this place that we ended up using. He drove by it, took some pictures, sent me the pictures. He said, "What about this?" And I said, "That's fantastic," because it's old, it's decrepit, it's got several stories. It seems kind of imposing. We didn't want something huge on this sort of sorry little island. So I knew we would end up building the inside of all of that because it was so specific. We've got the corridor where the captain's suite is adjacent to another room where you've got to be able to see both directions. The parlor space had to kind of work, and the check-in desk, stairway, lobby space, all of that. I've done that kind of thing before. And so that was, really something that seemed to fit there. We designed all the wallpaper very specifically for the tone of it, and wanted it to be realistic, but have a little bit of an edge to it.
I think as well, like you can maybe play around with it and think of something like the Bates Motel, and
Absolutely.
there's those moments.
That exterior, we could not find. I was looking for that house behind the Bates Motel. It's from, I believe, the Edward Hopper painting, House by the Railroad. And so our design department put some drawings together of what that little cupola is on the top of the house behind the base motel, and we copied that and had it put in post. So I really wanted it to have that sort of, not haunted house, but, you know, kind of spooky quality to it, but still realistic.
Yes, and I think that like maybe because as like audience members, we've seen so much like spooky houses or hotels that you can kind of like have a preconceived notion of what it might look like on the outside, but then on the inside you can just build up so much. So like, you know, because you know that it's been renovated, you can play around with how the renovation's gone and how it's like supposed to look nice, but there's always a bit of a weird eeriness to it. And then the idea of a crawl space in the basement was like, nope, no, thank you.
We actually did go into some historic houses and buildings in Massachusetts that had basements that were very much that same quality. So we used a lot of that research to do the basement, which was, of course, another set. And it was a specialized set where it was kind of built in forced perspective. And then we had the situation, they rigged the actors down there, especially the clown, to move very quickly on a moving rig because there's very little space to actually crawl. And we had the back wall movable so we could make it seem longer and, you know, more condensed at certain shots and make it seem longer. So it was engineered to do that.
Yeah, I think like Christian was telling me about that sort of work, the stunt work that was required for the scene like that, where you, I guess, as audience members, you just think of someone like running around to them, but then actually there's a lot to it, and how they have to be a little bit extra careful when as you guys are building it. Oh man, those location recce's to like the basement area must have been so creepy and eerie though.
Yeah. Yeah. Some really good, they have a lot of, in Massachusetts, there were a lot of older basement or cellar spaces that were rough hewn stonework and things like that you don't find that on the West Coast.
And do you find as well that like in your mind you're thinking about, because of like the geography of the island, that you have to be a little bit extra careful with what you put into the houses, as you mentioned, like even something as simple as brickwork?
Yes, absolutely. And again, we had such good visible research right there in front of us, where I was actually staying in a colonial, it had been a tavern, which the word tavern does not mean what it does now. This was a way station where you would stop on the way to somewhere and stay overnight. And I stayed in this place that was built in the 1700s, and it's a historical building, and part of it was rented out, and that's where I was living for all the time that I was there. So there was all kinds of details inside there. They had these giant fireplaces and other elements that are indicative of that time period. The floorboards are ridiculously wide, 24-inch wide, a board that you cannot buy today, as a plank, or it would be incredibly expensive because they were cutting down virgin trees and they had giant boards.
Isn't that funny though as well? There's like little bits like that where they were cutting down certain trees which are probably a good couple thousand years old, but if they were to do that now, it wouldn't even be the same size because
No.
they're just not as old.
No.
Or as big. Yeah, fascinating, isn't it, really? And it's also the fact that those boards, I wonder when they come to replace them, how much of a pain in the backside it is going to be to replace them, because they're so wide. It's like, do you just have to buy the double the amount just to make up for the size?
So the house that we used for the exterior of the Warren house, Richard Warren House and Richard Warren Museum. That is an actual built in 16 something. And that house had been moved from where it was originally located sometime in the 1980s, I think. They moved it, and the people built a proper foundation and sort of basement underneath it. And they took it all apart and moved it, or apart what they needed. But that also it was quite amazing, because when Hero saw it, he was just like tickled pink. The upper floor has these giant wide boards that are not that thick, and there are cracks between them, and there's no structure except for a few beams. You can see activity through the crack from upstairs, downstairs. You can see through to see what people are doing. I mean, it is quite amazing that those old buildings have held up as well as they have all these years.
Yeah, I guess like in a way as well, like they don't build stuff like how they used to, which which is sad in a way. But then also like having those sort of resources there, even literally in like what I don't want to say the palm of your hand, but like being there because you're living there and seeing all these things. There must have been so many different ideas that sparked into your head that you're just thinking, I haven't thought about certain stuff, and this is literally just a perfect thing now. Even like the idea of like the floorboards and being able to look up, which is in itself a quite creepy thing.
Yeah, it's something that didn't really make it into the series, but there were discussions about that when we had built the set on stage, because we used the exterior of that house, but people are actually living in that house, and we copied the interior on stage.
Yeah. So cool though. It must have been so creepy though as well staying there. But what I'm curious to know about as well is like how much does location recce's play a factor in how you might design/change an idea of design and how the space will be used for when they come to shooting?
So that house we looked and looked and looked and looked, and most houses back there have been sort of kept in their same form, but have been modified to some modernization and things like that. And when the location department found that house for the Richard Warren exterior, I was just ecstatic. I was like, that is fantastic. So hard to find that basically untouched house. And it was off in a remote area, which we really wanted. We didn't want to see a whole bunch of neighboring houses and things like that, which you're almost always stuck with. And the other thing that came up quite a few times is, because of how these old villages and towns were made and built, the main road would be right out front. And the main road is a highway. Maybe not a giant highway, but it's a 2-lane highway. And that just, I wanted to avoid that as much as possible, so that it was much more rural and primitive in that way, that they don't have the highway department out there, painting lines on roads and things like that. So to avoid that, it was tricky.
Do you find as well, like when you have like what you're saying about like having stuff like highways and having those sort of, maybe I don't want to say like a sheltered life, but more of like a life away from a city and the sort of hustle and bustle of like issues? Do you find that sometimes it can make your design a little bit more simplistic, because then you don't have to worry about when you're in a big town or big office, that you can just sort of play around with it a bit more?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We ended up having to, for the town itself, we ended up having to cobble together several different locations. One of them was this place called Bearskin Neck, which is in Rockport, right on the coast. And it's a tourist destination, and there are many along the East Coast, Massachusetts and up into New Hampshire, etc. And we picked a little corner of that area because most of it is built up with the ice cream store and the art gallery, and then the other art gallery and the 17 other art galleries, and it's just overbuilt. The structures are all nice and old and cute looking, but it was too much commerce, too thriving, too you know, too much going on.
Yeah, and do you find as well when you have something like that, you can maybe then narrow down of like, you obviously would narrow down what you want and what you don't want, because as you said, there's too much going on. But do you find that then you can really think that instead of having, you know, 3 art galleries, we can then play around to show that there'll be something else like a mum and pup sort of store, and then there'll also be the police station, and then there'll also be a like a hardware store as well, rather than the sort of generic stuff like a Starbucks, for example.
Right. Yeah. And quite a bit of shots that we did in this area, Bearskin Neck, we had shops that we couldn't really avoid looking at, and we boarded them up like they were out of business, like things were so slow in this village that, you know, the thriving quality was just not there at all. That a lot of business had maybe started but gone out of business, and businesses were boarded up. And so we did a lot of that to bring it down and make it seem more decrepit and more kind of sad.
Yeah, I guess it's also in a way that you can, I feel like it's like slightly cheating, because you can just board them up and it's like that's our issue sort of gone in a way, and that we can actually play on it a bit more with what's going on, in terms of like this town is like it desperate needs people to come visit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we pushed that in several other places where you know, the abandoned house, just various things where we wanted it to seem much more rundown than it is in actuality.
Yeah, and I could imagine as well that like you're just playing, you know, you could play around as well, like the geography of the side, that you could, as I said, like the oh look, you know, the Starbucks, yeah, board that up straight away, because we know there's not going to be that on the island, and you could be really picky and choosing. And I guess if once you talk to like the DOP of like how they want the scene to be blocked out as well, you could probably play around with that a bit more as well.
Yes, and the area where the ferry boat comes in, that's called Lane's Cove, and there's really only one structure there, so we had to actually add structures to make it seem like it was a little more viably active, that these lobster fishermen have their lobster pots and their boats, and they come and go. And then later on, we were looking for the vintage town from the 1700s, and there are several town-like things back there, Sturbridge Village and several others, but they're kind of like a museum, and they're a little too overdone. So we found this farm, Rebecca Nurse Farm, where we had a meeting house where the wedding takes place, and that was a good structure. The exterior was good, the interior was good, and there was a barn and a house and a couple other things. And then we took some of those structures that we had used at the wharf ferry sequence, and we revamped them and moved them to this farm. And that's what you see when they're coming in with a little wagon or the little buggy for her entrance there. And that was all stuff. We built the cemetery. We did all that stuff there.
No, cool. I think that's for episode 6, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, because I was again Christian. I wanted to get onto episode 6 because Christian spoke to him before. He was mentioning that that was the last episode to be shot, which I found quite interesting because usually you have it in blocks and you're shooting in a basically in a chronological order. But I
Yeah.
guess because this is a period piece, you are kind of just going towards the end, so you don't have to worry about ripping sets up by mistake when you could be, when you might need it in a few weeks' time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was very helpful that they had scheduled it that way so that we could, focus on all the other things before we got to that, and then just, put all our energies into that historical period stuff.
And do you find as well that, like, when you have something like that, it, how does your designing affect it? Because you're effectively doing 9 episodes and then plus 1 because it's something that's, I wouldn't say 100% totally different, but I can imagine it's being approached in a different way because it feels like it's like a short film added into the series.
Yeah. Yeah. Although we really had to plan the whole thing from day one. And we knew we were going to have to build the interior of Richard Warren's house, upstairs and downstairs, for all of those sequences where, they try to murder him in his bed and all of those things. We knew that was coming. So we would build something, and a lot of times we will have to build on a platform so it's raised up, so when you look out the window you're not seeing the stage floor and things like that. We did a second story bedroom for that sequence where he's being stabbed, and I think we used that platform for something else previous to that, and then took that down and knew we were going to have to reuse that platform for the bedroom sequence.
Yeah, that's pretty cool though. And then having that sort of idea of building up like that, because you again have to hide it in a way. But when you have something like of that size being built, and in terms of on the stage, what's the sort of logistics and thinking behind it? Because you have to reinforce it, right? Because people are going to be going up and down it, and also the lights. Are those little things that you need to think about as well whilst you're building?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all part of the process. We come up with a design. I came up with the design basically of the interior of the town hall, the corridor, the entry, the offices, Tom Loft's office, the conference room. From the photograph that I had picked for the exterior, I designed all of that before I even went back to Massachusetts. I had it all kind of planned out, and we knew because of all the things that can happen, that's a standing set, that's kind of a permanent set, that we couldn't put it on the floor, we couldn't cheat it. We had to put it up on a platform, and we knew that it would get utilized in various, quite a few episodes. So it was a more permanent thing. And in fact, from what I understand, it's still standing back there on that stage. So
That's quite cool that they still got it up there. Well, there could be hints of a potential season 2. You never know.
never know.
They wanna jinx anything. It might be announced before this episode even comes out. So before, when you're first designing it in the sort of modern day time, do you still add things that might be there for episode 6 for when they go back in time, or do you just completely wipe the slate clean?
It's a little bit of both. We are knowing that we are going to be doing this period 1700 thing. So we would try to incorporate bits of that, but the fact that this is a somewhat remote and backward place, they're not really up, they haven't caught up to the 2000s or whatever. So it has that kind of old, the townhouse or the town hall, we figured it was an older building. That building was built in the, I think, 1800s, that had been refurbished maybe in the 50s, something like that. And it's sort of stuck in time, you know, hadn't been upgraded in 2005 or something like that. So, and the fact that Katie had written into it, there's all these historical paintings that are on the walls in various places. Some of them are in the Historical Society, but some of them are in the town hall hallway. Things like that kind of bring the history of the island into almost everything.
I guess it's also, you can add your own little style and feel to it as well, and then play up to it a bit more.
Something I really like doing when I can is utilize screens so that they kind of block the view, but you can see through them, and they're not solid. They're an ornamental thing. So at the lobby of the town hall, there's this screen that when you come in the front door, it sort of blocks in a way the fact that we're not out on a location, that we're actually on stage. But you can see through it, you can see people coming and going. And I did the same thing in the Salty Whale, where I just wanted to divide the space a little bit, and we used oars that you row with and these floats, and we made these sort of see-through screens that indicate something about where you are, that this was nautical stuff, and but it also spatially divides the space into various sections. I love doing that.
And with something like that, how do you then talk to, say, the DOP or the gaffer or set deck about that space and how they're going to be using it? Because you might be able to divide it, but then sometimes it might cause a hindrance when it comes to shooting.
Absolutely. And so we would go through everything, you know, on a day-to-day basis with the DP, with Hero, or the director that was doing that sequence, and we would toss things back and forth. It's always a, you know, cooperative sort of process, and if it seemed like something I was doing was going to get in someone's way, then we'd, you know, I'd adjust or whatever. But I've been doing this a really long time, so I think I kind of know where I can get away with it and where it's not going to work.
Okay. Again, it varies in different ways. That it's like, as you said, that you'll you know, because you've had so much experience from it, because you've been doing it for a number of decades. There's obviously going to be the conversations that people have regarding it and how they want to shoot the scenes. But I guess it's also one person's idea might hinder someone else's, but also, because they're all creative, you all look at it in like a different kind of way in how things are built. But then also certain scenes spend you spend more time in certain scenes, so they want to shoot it in a certain way as well.
And a lot of this also has to do with, I tend to be very spatially aware, I guess. And a lot of it has to do with, when I read the script, what kind of action do I envision? And I never know exactly how a director is going to approach that, but a lot of times I give them my take on it. And for example, in the Salty Whale, We knew it had to be this sort of restaurant, this sort of bar, this place where people go, but it also wanted to be a fairly good-sized space, and I felt that it needed some varying of the levels, so there wasn't just one big room. So we've got an upper section where when you come in the door, you're on this upper level, then there's some steps down to kind of a mid-level, and then there's one more step that goes down to where the bar, and also that level is also where the kitchen and the bathrooms are. So in one of the early scripts in the first episode, we see Tom kind of running around and running up and down and going, to the bar and then back to where the reporter is, and that blocking changed. But in the episode where Patricia throws the big event, it seemed to work out really well, that she was kind of running around and then she would run up, and she would send Rosemary to talk to those older people that they didn't seem like they were in the right place, and things like that. So it's one of those things I like to give the director and the DP really something interesting to work with as much as I can.
And I think that space in the bar as well, because you have the stairs going up towards the entrance. Yeah, you could probably play around with it so much more, knowing that you can have that lower deck space and then it will lead to a kitchen.
And what we found really coincidentally is, and you don't really catch it too much unless you're really paying attention, but the exterior that we were using for that Salty Whale restaurant, it has an upper doorway and stairs that go up to it. So from the street level, you go up some stairs and then you would go in and be on that upper level until you decided to go downstairs again. And I thought that was really fantastic that we found an exterior that did that.
And I think, personally, I think that's probably one of my favorite sets is that bar. I guess it's just because of the area and space that people have, but yeah, just, I don't know, something about it that I really like and enjoy.
It was fun. It was a fun thing. And I had envisioned originally that it was some kind of a wharf or a warehouse building that had been rehabbed into a restaurant that was right on the water. And coincidentally, this building that we found is right on the water. It's hard to tell, but if you kind of go around the corner there, you will see that it is right on the water.
Yeah, that's pretty, again, cool thinking about the geography as well, and the way that you've got it placed. And I feel like sometimes as well, it's like might be a slightly happy accident with the exterior and interior and how you sort of match cut them, and then also how you can play around with it as well. And what I'm curious to know about as well, I've got a couple of questions left. What was your favorite set design?
I would have to say the Salty Whale, just because we did a lot of elaborate things for the interior of the Breakwater Inn, and that was fun. I've sort of done the Victorian interior way back when I started doing theater sets. I did some of that, and I've always enjoyed that. And actually, this little town that I'm in right now on this remote island has a lot of Victorian architecture. So I'm sort of steeped in all of that, and comes very natural. But the Salty Whale, I wanted something that was fairly eccentric and didn't, we've got posts and beams and all kinds of things all over the place that it's kind of a mashup of different things. And I had a lot of fun with that.
Okay. Again, great minds I think alike, both of us. Love that set. I think there's also I think it's just the the way that it's not like a typical bar though. It could be like a really, one level bar where, you got everybody in like one side,
Mm.
pretty much occupying being where the drinks are served. But there it's just like such a big open space. I guess there's also having the fact that you can have food there as well. So it kind of opens up a bit more. But I think it's also just the use of space for it in episode 4 and how that plays out and how you can utilize both space in how the story is told, but then also how you can show the horror elements of it as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's still, yeah, I really, really like that sort of set as well. There was something else I wanted to mention, sorry, about episode 4, and that was when they go onto the beach and you've got the fire burning. As a designer, because that's like a night shoot and it's very predominantly a location, how do you think about the ideas for something like that, and then also for the design for the fire? Because you have an idea of like the occult look for it, then also you will need to speak to what's it called, people like SFX and VFX in the way that this fire is going to look and feel on the day.
It was a very complicated situation because we had done a bunch of research on pyres, fires, campfires, shapes of burning witch fires, all of those various things. And we, again, it was night, so it was a little bit limited, but we had to put that fire together with a real fire that we shot like in the parking lot, where we could control everything because that beach was kind of remote, and then the actual fire on the beach was on a lighting effect, and a structure, but a lighting effect. And then those two were married together with visual effects magic. And so we had 3 different departments kind of involved in that, the lighting department, the special effects department, and the post visual effects department.
Okay, yeah, and again, it looks incredible on screen, and it's just so haunting. And having that as pretty much a predominant light source as well,
Yeah.
creates a very big like, oof, this is it's quite bad.
Yeah.
Just to sort of wrap up the episode, is there anything that I might have missed in my questions, or is there anything that you want to ask that you would like to add to it?
Well, various people have discussed with me about elements that we've borrowed or maybe done an homage to other films. We spoke about the Bates Motel, the house behind the Bates Motel, the boat that in episode 7, where we see Richard Warren get destroyed, basically. We very consciously tried to copy the inside of it's called the Orca, which is the boat from Jaws. So the wood paneling, the little banquette seat, the hanging light that swings, all those elements. We bought a boat that we shot on stage with a giant gimbal rig, and could rock and do all those things that they would like them to do. And then we had a matching boat for the exterior, which we shot out in the bay, off the coast there. And just the fact that we had a lot of fun kind of trying to mirror elements from movies like like Jaws, and things from The Shining in the Breakwater Inn, and various other things that we just have a great deal of fun with.
Yeah, I think that comes down to like your research and paying homage to other shows. I didn't want to say that the boat felt like very much like the Orca, but it felt a little bit more sturdy in parts than the Orca itself. But they had that elements of it, and I think having that familiarity with audiences is like you can you can see what people are going for, but then at the same time having that familiarity kind of makes you feel like, oh, this is not going to be safe. And then when they play on the sound design a bit more, they can play around with like the creakiness or the way that the waves will be hitting the boat as well, and creating that sort of unsafe element to it all.
Yeah. We had an enormous amount of fun with that boat. We also did Shep's boat on stage, and had a real boat that went out. And so, yeah, we had a tank on stage. It was good stuff.
Yeah, and again, it looks so cool, and I guess that's also like the magic of filmmaking, the way that all the planning and pre-prep and designing can go into something like that, and the research.
I was extremely fortunate because things have been so slow in the business that I kind of had to pick my pick of people back there in Massachusetts. And they let me bring my art director from California and the decorator I had worked with before when I did Castle Rock a few years back. And I knew a lot of the people. So we got the best scenics, we got the best carpenters. It was a dream.
When you have something like that, because you're in I guess I don't want to sound, it's going to sound a bit not bad, but negative. But when you're in a situation where you have a bit of a downturn with work and you're able to sort of pick people, do you find it then you're finding it easier to pick the people that you want and then also sell them to the studio because one, you've worked with them before, but then two, that you can showcase their work a bit more and actually make people understand what the vision that you're going for?
Yes, absolutely. We used a graphic designer who is just amazing, and I've worked with her for almost 20 years. And she did all the games, she did the book, she did all the pamphlets, the maps, just pretty much all the major graphics in the show. And normally I wouldn't have been able to use her because she's so busy all the time that you can't pry her away from what she's doing. But fortunately, she was available, and it was a great plus for our show.
Yeah, and I gotta say, it looks incredible. I love the look and feel of the show.
Well, thank you.
Even though it gives me the chills a little bit. But yeah, it's really great. And yeah, hats off, Steve, to you and your team. The Widow's Bay streaming now on Apple TV Plus. Thank you again so much for your time, Steve.
My pleasure.
You take care, and bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.